Hello, everybody, and welcome to rugbyleaguehub.com's White Line Fever. And I think it's our third, maybe fourth, Thursday night or Thursday morning show. Fourth, Jimmy's holding up four.
Fourth, I believe.
Fourth. And as usual, I've got Jimmy Smith here. How are you, Jimmy?
G'day, Steve. I'm really well. Really excited about our show tonight. Really interested to talk to our first guest, our special guest, Gareth Carvel, and of course, have a look at what's going on at the Brisbane Broncos. They're struggling, Stephen.
Yeah, Gareth Carvel from the GMB Union, the Rugby League Players section. A lot happening at the moment. The players aren't doing much on the field, on the pitch, but there's a fair bit happening off the pitch. Welcome to the show, Gareth.
Thanks very much. Yeah, great to be here.
Hey, Gareth, really appreciate your time. So thank you for that. We're really lucky in Australia here. We've got our teams are back, our players are playing. How is it for your players, for those players who are over in the UK? And I'd imagine really desperate to play, but understand the situation that the code and the country is gripped in.
Yeah, very different indeed. I mean, there's little chance really of anything returning back to normal for a good 12 months. So getting sport restarted within England is pretty tough. Football has gone back, soccer. Obviously, a big difference within the contact of the game. So the protocol for the social distancing, for retraining, for the return to training, return to games is still in draft at the moment. We're still going through that with a fine-tooth comb and trying to get that sorted. There has been a date penciled in for the 16th of August for the start of Super League. So whether that will happen is yet to be seen.
Gareth, as far as I guess pay cuts are concerned, we saw Ian Lenigan put out a statement during the week saying he'd put in £500,000 out of his own pocket to keep Wigan afloat. But we also saw some talk of pay cuts in relation to Luke Thompson's transfer from St Helens to Canterbury. Have the players accepted pay cuts en masse? How are they structured? We heard there's going to be some sort of sliding scale about the size of pay cuts. They seem to be different at each club. Well, what's the situation with pay cuts?
Yeah, so it's really quite different again over here. Each club is an individual business and has its own structure, its own income revenue and everything like that. So run totally different. So normally the governing body would have a big say on this, but in this situation they don't. So basically, when rugby league stopped, there's no income coming into the clubs. The clubs predominantly live on the season ticket sales, on match days, the food, people coming in spending money on merchandise, everything like that. That's generally where the money comes from. Plus sponsorship. Obviously the sponsors want to see their product, their name out there. If there are no games, that's not happening. So there's all sorts of things going on in the background regarding that. Again, Sky, there's the Sky deal there that if we don't play so many games within a certain amount of time, that deal could be revoked. So there's that danger as well. So it was a really difficult conversation to have with all the players. What we did was go to each individual club, have a speech, have a chat with the players, see what the club could afford. We had access to all their finances. And the suggested cuts, obviously, as a union, we want 100% wages, and we always will. We'll strive to get that as soon as possible. But it doesn't take a rocket scientist to work out that no income means you can't really spend. And the 90% of the spend of clubs goes on wages and player wages. So the players are well within their rights not to do that. They've got a contract in place. They can take that contract and that's it. And I think that's something that might have happened at St Helens. So the players have really had to buy into it. The clubs can't survive at the moment with the outgoings they have. So the players have really bought into it and shown that they're in it for the long haul as well. Now, some clubs are looking to talk about next year. We've had a big meeting across Super League with the players and categorically came back that we don't want to talk about next year. There's far too many unknowns. We don't know what's going to happen. We don't know when the games are going to start. We don't know what crowds are going to be there, if any, whether that's going to last into the next season. There are all sorts of variables that we'd be really unsensible to try and sort of judge and guess and agree to anything. So at the moment, you know, we're looking at the review. So we got written into these agreements that every month there's a review, and that'll look at, you know, if anything's changed. I mean, it's changing daily, as you'll know, Steve, over here. You know, the government guidance and things are constantly changing. So as that changes, we're looking to try and get money back in the players' pockets. It's looking more and more like the reviews will go ahead when we return to play. You know, I think that's the big one. Looking at it each month, especially when nothing's changed, is a bit of a non-starter, I think. You know, although it is good to talk to the clubs and still get their ideas and you know, see their financial position. But again, it's trying to be sensible and fair. The players are a sensible bunch. They realise that, you know, without a club, there's no jobs, you know, and they'd rather have 90% of the wages than 100% of no wages. So it's, you know, it's sort of a bit of a catch-22. They're sort of backed into a corner and had to accept these cuts, but they have committed to them. So it's you know, it's a difficult time, and it's difficult for the league over here. But you know, we are coming through it together, I think.
Hey, Gareth, you know, there are grave concerns about some of the clubs in the NRL. Obviously, what about, from your perspective, clubs at Super League level, Championship level, League One level? How realistic is it that those clubs can't continue, given what's transpired with the pandemic?
Yeah, I mean, that's the reality of it. You know, there are some clubs that will be absolutely fine. You know, the clubs with the big backers, with the multimillionaire owners who can plough money in, they'll be absolutely fine. It's the clubs that at the lower end, and like you said, the Championship clubs that aren't well financed, that have to live on the revenue that they create themselves.
Yeah,
they're going to struggle. Luckily, over here we've got the furlough, which I don't know if anybody knows about that. Basically, the government are covering 80% of everybody's wage, up to £2,500 a month. So that's helped Championship clubs basically get through the pandemic so far, and that will continue to October, albeit reduced. The Super League, slightly different. That has helped massively. You know, you're looking at something around about £140,000 a month for that scheme, for the job retention scheme. So that's helped massively, but that will stop once players go training, and that's when I think the problems will start. Also, this next year, you know, people at the moment, the Super League clubs are living on their season ticket sales and sponsorship. Now, people will want that money back. I would, you know, if I've not seen any games or seen less games, I'd want my money back.
Yep.
The clubs won't be able to do that. What they'll do is end up offering discounts to season ticket sales next year. So then it has an impact on next year. So you're looking at whatever's going on now is going to continue into next year, albeit being pretty unknown.
Gareth, if I could just pin you down on your first answer, to your knowledge, have all Super League players accepted pay cuts, or everyone but Luke Thompson, or, you know, I mean, you know, is that the situation, or is it still in train? The process is still in train, you know?
Yeah, no, the majority have. You know, all the documents have been signed, and that's been sort of well, it's been finalised now. So yeah. I mean, there are a few that sort of refused, and they're well within their rights to do that. You know, and that's happened. Now, you know, with Luke Thompson, he's moved on. He's saved the club probably a considerable amount of money, and they're looking to probably sign someone else. There's been a big sort of uproar with clubs signing players while they're taking money off the current players, which to me is absolutely scandalous. You know, and we speak to those clubs, ask the reasons behind that. They explain. Whether we believe that explanation, I'm not sure. But you know, until we can have a look at the evidence of that, then you know, we can't really judge.
Gareth, do you think there are other players that, as well as Luke, who may think, right, well, there's question marks about whether the season comes back here in England. There's definitely rugby league being played in Australia, and clubs still have positions available and space within their salary cap. Do you think Luke will be the first of a few players that come across from Super League?
Yeah, I think you know, it's such a short career. And let's not beat around the bush. The Super League players, the young English Super League players, want to play in the NRL. They want to test themselves. So, yeah, I think there will be a little bit of a migration for our top players, which will be a massive blow to the game over here. But it can't be helped. If the clubs can't afford to keep hold of these players, then it's going to be difficult to do that. But sad to see that. But,
no, sorry, mate. What about the proposed rule changes? You knew we'd get to that eventually. The idea of having no scrums for the rest of the year, for instance.
Yeah.
How do the players feel about that?
Not very happy because they don't get much rest. I'd be exactly the same. There's 45 seconds there where you can just trot over to the scrum and have a cuddle and all the rest of it. But yeah, there's the reason behind it is a medical reason. The doctor explained. A one-on-one tackle, you have 2 face-to-face contacts. In a scrum, with the amount of people from each side and the contacts within that, there's 132 face-to-face contacts. So the risk of passing the virus is a lot higher than in a tackle. Plus the length of time that those players are together increases the risk again. So, it was down to a medical reason. These are proposals still. The big difficulty we will have is how do you restart a game and how do you replicate that? I love to see a backline on a backline. That's the only opportunity in a game that the backs have a bit of space. They can put something on and do something. I think it's a massive part of our game. So trying to replicate that is going to be really difficult. Whether you take the forwards off the pitch, I don't think. There's a lot of discussion that needs to be done around that as to whether it can even work.
I'm not sure if you're a student of the Australian game, but have you noted that the rule changes here have been, it's very pronounced. The 1 referee, the 6 again rule, the speed of play the ball, the increase in attacking football, the increase of ball in play, the shortening in the length of time to play 80 minutes. There's nothing but ticks from everyone here with the changes. Do you think that's also been noted, Gareth?
Yeah. I think the only thing that sort of comes out of that, and yes, we're trying to speed the game up. I think the 6 again rule brings that. It speeds the game up a lot. It gives some teams a lot more tackles within the line, and I think at the start of it, we're going to wait and see how it pans out. I think the start there was some blowout scores, and people are talking about that over in the NRL. Maybe it was down to that rule. The concern I think that came across is the welfare side of things, especially if we're trying to cram as many games in as possible. Obviously, 1 game a week it's great. Speed the game up. Yes, you get the recovery. You get to look after the players properly. If you're asking them to do 2, possibly 3 games in 10 days, that's when it sort of becomes an issue. Fatigue becomes an issue, and injuries, obviously come from fatigue. So when we're trying to speed the game up, is it to the detriment of the quality that we're going to get on the field? And that's a really fine balancing act that we've got to try and get.
Gareth, could I ask just 2 questions in one? When this started, it was reported, I think, in The Guardian that all the clubs had said if a player refuses to take a pay cut, he'll be blackballed. And I put that into the second part of my question, was that I said this on social media when you put out your press release, and if I didn't say it to your face, I'd be a bit mealy-mouthed, is that you had an anonymous player quoted in a press release, and I thought these are big, strong guys who kind of risk life, and well, hopefully not life, but limb every weekend. And yet we couldn't have a guy or a group of guys stand up and put their name to the quote in your press release. And are those 2 things linked? Are the players worried about backlash and being victimised if they do stand up to the clubs? Is that the reason?
Without a doubt. So I had that blacklisting confirmed from a CEO. So obviously brought it up in the CEO meeting. We said under no circumstances can this happen. If we get a sniff of any evidence whatsoever that this is happening, then we'll be going to town. It's as simple as that. The trouble is, it's like going into a supermarket. So if you go in intending to pinch a bottle of milk, you've got the plans there, you've got the full intention of taking the milk, you walk to the front door, but then you put the milk down and walk out of the store. You've not actually done it. And that's sort of the situation that we're in. There's talk about it and people planning on doing it, but it's not actually happened. It's the same with the reps. You know, we've got a group of reps, round about 6 or 7 from each Super League club at the moment, and they're worried, you know, that them standing up and their voice being heard will put them in a tricky position when it comes to contract negotiations. You know, are they classed as a trouble causer, all that sort of thing, which, you know, is a stigma that comes, I think, with unions and all the rest of it. But, you know, trying to explain that as a collective, and I think we did it with the Blue Tile campaign that every player put out at the same time on social media, this square blue tile to say that we're in and we're involved. You know, everyone together makes a real difference, and no one can be victimised. But it's real, you know, and I think historically over here in this country, it's happened a lot. As coming up from sort of, you know, through the ranks, you feel privileged to play for a club, so you don't want to be kicking up a fuss about anything. You know, you just take it and that's it. You want to make it, and you want to be in the first team, and that happens throughout your career. So it's difficult to try and get that transition to get players to stand up and talk.
Hey, Gareth, I can only imagine the challenges, the sleepless nights, the amount of work that you've had to do over the course of the last 3 and 4 months. Just incredible time in the code and on the globe, for that matter. Really appreciate your time tonight, mate, and thank you very much for joining us.
Anytime. Great to see you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Gareth. Great stuff there.
Right.
Yeah, Gareth Carvel there, former Great Britain front rower, and of course he is now heading up the Players Union. What was your take on that, Steve?
Well, you know, the big thing was I don't think August 16 for return of Super League has been said publicly before, so I think that's news. Secondly, his comment about players being afraid to speak up because they feel that they'll be victimised at contract time. I think that was definitely newsworthy, and also the fact that clubs, he said that clubs signing players at the same time as they're asking others to take pay cuts I used a word like disgraceful. I think he said disgraceful. So they were the 3 news angles out of that for me, Jimmy, always thinking along those lines. And they were the 3 angles. I think I'd lead on the first one. The third one would be in the second part. And when I get off here, the third item will be, So that's the way I'd be looking at,
No, very good, very good. So we appreciate Gareth's time on that one. That's interesting, isn't it? August 16. So fingers crossed on that one. 27 points to 6 was the final score, mate. And that probably flattered the Broncos. Is that the way you saw it?
Yeah, Jimmy, I just thought that it was Newcastle played a very structured footy, and you are better placed to assess tactics and stuff like that than me. But Newcastle played very structured footy with some, talented players, but didn't really do much out of the box. And it was still good enough to beat a Broncos side that just didn't seem to have anything, except a few big hits. Tavita Pangai Jr., a couple of big hits. Milford, Anthony Milford, disappointing. Or Anthony Milford, as they call him here next year in the World Cup. They never pronounce the H in Anthony. Very, very, very disappointing, bitterly disappointing Brisbane side, and they just haven't. They're still in lockdown. The Broncos, they didn't come back from the pandemic.
I'll tell you what's really interesting, and this is when you're watching. So I was watching Fox League's coverage, and they take Channel 9's pictures, and then you can see them start showing a player extensively. So there was extended periods there where the commentary of Andrew Voss and Greg Alexander didn't match the pictures that were on there because they weren't talking about Anthony Milford, and all of a sudden and you can only imagine, you think, I wonder what Joey's saying about Anthony Milford at this point. And it's fair though, because I think it's clear, it was mentioned a couple of times. He had a couple of runs, they were ineffective. There was one stage there he did play at the line, but mostly he's playing way behind the line, way before the line. It was, okay, but he's $1 million player, or he's your $1 million player, or he's getting paid $1 million. And people say, it shouldn't matter, but it does when it impacts on your salary cap like that. Like, they're not getting $1 million worth of value out of him. It's a real concern for Anthony Seibold. Think about the try they got. It was an intercept where Xavier Coates ran 100 metres. And really, if McCulloch passes short to Man hits Edric Lee and Edric Lee scores. They were lucky to get as close as they did. Ponga was quiet after signing his $4.5 million deal. What did you take of that?
I've got to say from this distance, I was vaguely aware that he'd agreed to stay, and it was a lot of money, but I wasn't It wasn't sort of screaming headlines here. So I thought he had a solid game. It wasn't his best game. I thought what was interesting was when they had a one-man advantage, the Knights, and they just were happy just to close the game down. They had, I guess, subconsciously so little respect for the attacking ability of their opponents that they were happy to not score when they had a one-man advantage, because they as long as they stopped them from scoring, that was it. You know what I mean? Like they were kicking for the corners and kicking for penalty when they had a chance to put on tries.
They were doing to Brisbane what Brisbane were trying to do to the Cowboys in the 2015 grand final. So back at you. Hey, crackdown on 6 again rule. That's been the big talk this week. Sin bin's going to be used. There was a couple of sin bins used, not specifically for that, but it's not only the new rules, but it's the reinforcement of the new rules that is interesting, I think.
Well, just the fact that it has only taken the coaches 3 weeks, is it? As long as we've been on air in this time slot, to come up with a way to exploit a new rule which is intended to open up the game. And that is basically, for listeners and viewers who haven't been across this, is basically give away a 6 again. You get a 6 again for holding down the opposition. Give it away early in the tackle count when they're a long way from the try line to slow them down. So that is a professional foul. I mean, it is a professional foul. That is the actual definition: to deliberately give away a penalty. So it is. Yeah, I got to say, Jimmy, I thought the footy the first weekend we came back was different. It was more open. Guys playing what's in front of them, and maybe it was just the fatigue from guys not having played in 2 months. And now I think the footy is much more like what we had before, where hitting pressure points, kicking late, chasing well. And it's more Aussie, what people hear, what Gareth would call Aussie football, which is percentage football, and a little less interesting to watch as a result. But I don't know, unless you actually make every team, you play around and you make them all have 3 months off and you play around and you play a season over 3 years, you might get that sort of football all the time. Otherwise, the coach is always going to exploit and always going to wear down the legislators,
Yeah, not good for the broadcast deal, that idea. Isaac Moses, deregistered, have the right to appeal, which from what I understand he's going to take up. Interesting, Tim Manor was the one who came in and said, I was coerced into providing false information for the Integrity Unit back in 2017. He's got a host of players, we know that, some real stars, including coaches and players at the same club. I'm going to ask you your take on this one, and also on its reporting, because obviously journalists rely so heavily on player managers for information, and it's very interesting how stories that are negative towards player managers are reported.
Well, I think it varies from manager to manager, reporter to reporter, and media outlet to media outlet. I mean, I saw a story in the Sydney Morning Herald that says that the players can rip up their contracts with Isaac now, and that seemed to be a pretty straight story, reported straight. It used to be in the old days the gossip columnists got a lot of information out of player agents, and perhaps player agents got a good run in gossip columns as a result. But since the increased restrictions on and access to the players themselves and the coaches, they only do all-ins. Now, the general beat reporters and news reporters now rely on agents more, and people never tell you anything. Most people don't. Maybe we do, because, we love talking. But most people just don't give up information for free. Everyone's got a reason to tell you something. And if you never wrote a story quoting someone with an agenda, you'd never have a story. There'd be no story to write. So what happens now is that the only people speaking are maybe player agents, and the other people are all shut up over the last 5-10 years. And so the agendas of the player agents are, one, to get a good deal for their clients, and that's way up here. But further down, fair way down, is to get maybe a sympathetic run in the press. That's part of their agenda in dealing with the media and dealing with some media people and not other media people. So I guess this is where that unspoken contract comes home to roost, is when maybe the player agents need a favour, they need sympathetic coverage, and in some cases, I'm not back there. In some cases, they might be getting it. In some other cases, not.
Yeah, and the interesting one about that, you talk about, make sure they're getting their player a good deal, and also reported that it's a bit better than the actual deal that they get, so that other players then look at it and go, hang on a minute, I'm actually a better player than that guy. I should be getting that. And therefore the player manager says, well, if you want to get that, you come and see me because I'm able to negotiate.
Mate, I know one agent who would actually just ask to be called leading player agent. If you were going to get anything out of him, you had to call him leading player agent.
Give us a name.
No, I'm not going. I'm not going to, because I'm kind of thinking the conversation where he asked for that is probably off the record. I'll err on the side of caution there. It's probably not ethical for me to say so.
I'm putting into my Google search engine leading NRL player agent and an article written by Steve Mascott, and away we go.
Hey, I didn't say that I agreed to do it. I don't think. I think I always, well, maybe on a weak moment I might have done it once or twice, but generally speaking, I would have regarded adjectives as my domain. So yeah.
If he was asking you, he was asking other people too, and maybe someone said yes.
Use of adjectives falls firmly within my job description.
What about some adjectives around what Cam Smith's been up to? There was a bit of Cam Smith bashing, which seems to have, was interesting. Matt Tripp, the owner of the Melbourne Storm, came out and said, look, usually you guys reserve this for a month before the semi-finals, but you've got in early this year having a go at Cam Smith, and it's tall poppy syndrome.
Yeah, I remember in the early days of 10 years ago, people saying Cameron Smith was like good with referees. That was the extent of what they said then, and asking him about it in doing one of those Rugby League Week player A-lists. And he was quite offended by the suggestion. I'm sure he's heard it a lot since. But it is kind of tall poppy syndrome, I guess. And I'd never really, aside from a couple of isolated things, I never really understood the kind of polarizing aspect of Cameron Smith. I never really got it. Like he's always kind of smiling. And I know there's been isolated things he said to the referee, talking to the referee, unfortunately, when Alex McKinnon was injured, which he didn't know what was going on at the time.
Yeah.
There's been little isolated things where I could see he would rub the public the wrong way. But I don't really understand the kind of, and then he wouldn't talk to Channel 9 for half a season as a result of that. But I can't understand that. It doesn't add up in my head. It's like 2 + 2 = 1,000. The kind of heat he gets off people. I don't really get it.
He's not the lovable type of guy that Jonathan Thurston is, right? With a great laugh and this is the perception from a distance, right? He's more introspective. The fierce determination to win is there, quite obviously, and that comes to the fore a lot. And he's good. Mm-hmm. And that rankles people. And if you're a 37-year-old with as much experience as him, for a decade you were the captain of the Australian side, why wouldn't you use it to your advantage if you can influence referees? If you weren't doing that, then the coach has got to be talking to you and saying, hey, mate, you can influence results here. You can influence decisions for us here. And I think he's only using all the skill, just like a short pass out of dummy half, a little word in the referee's ear, and maybe things would go our way.
Yeah. And the thing about him as a player, which I said to someone this week, and it stands out for me, is he plays rugby league like it's not a contact sport. It's like, especially in attack, he's like one of those guys walking on hot coals. He doesn't feel it. Yeah. He doesn't feel the tackles. His mind always overrules his body. His mind tunes out the physical aspect of rugby league. They act. His mind does exactly what his body does exactly what his mind wants it to do, and that's an incredible thing to see in an athlete. It's like, you don't see individuals impose themselves on team sports very often. I haven't seen a lot of other sports aside from rugby league. I saw Shaquille O'Neal play once in Miami, and it was like, and I can't imagine what it would be like to see Jordan play. I know there's a ban on mentioning him. He's like become a cliche in all sports journalism worldwide. But he was like the whole men against boys thing. And you watch Joey. To me, Wally, Joey, that's Andrew Johns. If you're not a rugby league fan, if you're watching in China or something, and and also Peter Sterling, to me, even more than Lockyer and Thurston late in his career, particularly the last sort of 10 years. But there's very few players who it looks like men against boys. And the thing with Cameron is that he's not more imposing than anyone else, but he ignores the physical aspect of rugby league. It isn't there to him. Yep. It's all his mind. So anyway.
Very big in Wuhan, I believe, this podcast. That's the feedback we're getting through. Hey, we're really interested to see Luke Thompson. He's in, I think he started his first 5 days of quarantine in a Melbourne hotel room, but he'll be potentially playing for the Bulldogs round 8, probably round 9. We've seen him a little bit at international level. Give us an understanding of the strengths of Luke Thompson's game, mate. Is there anyone in the NRL that we could liken him to?
I think Luke Thompson is a big guy, but I think in the NRL he'll get bigger. I think he'll get bigger and stronger. Like if the Burgess twins had stayed over here, they may not have sort of filled out the way they did when they went to Australia. So I think Luke Thompson will get bigger. He actually plays like he's bigger than he is, and he's a big guy, but he's just he's got good footwork. I'd say footwork. If I think about Luke Thompson, the first expression I would say footwork, a really elite level footwork, runs really good lines and works hard in defence. So he I guess the James Graham without the kind of ragdoll head bobbing around. You know what I mean? Like, he kind of keeps his head quite still, Luke Thompson, but and kind of not the same personality either. Right? Like I think Luke Thompson, is not. If you say to him, you should have gone to the head bin, he's not going to go on a radio show on Saturday and give a half-hour dissertation to why he shouldn't. He's not, he's not that sort of guy. Like James Graham is a very forthright, upstanding, and eloquent kind of guy off the field. I think Luke Thompson could become that. He could become that,
And he might be coming back, James Graham.
That's the other big story broken in the last few hours, really, hasn't it?
Yeah. Would it be a fit at would it be back to St Helens, which is of course, the club that he played with previously?
I have no inside information on that, but you'd suggest that if there's one way to sort of get the fans back on side before they come back through the gate again, then might be to get a club icon back in return for one of the world's best players who you've sold to a club in Australia. I think that would be the one way to assuage fans. It would be to get James Graham back.
All right. Generally, I sign off this vodcast with saying any update on when the league might be back. I think we can say August 16.
Scoop. It wasn't good having a guest. It was the first time we had a guest, so I didn't want to promise too many people that we were going to have a guest. But in the end, we had one, and it was very newsworthy. Thanks to everyone for tuning in. And also, we went out on Periscope today, which you might be watching us on Twitter, I don't know. So everything's kind of experimental at the moment. But from the sounds of Gareth Carvell, we've got a while to get our systems right, Jimmy. We've got a few weeks yet. So I think things are going well so far.
I had a coach that used to talk about systems and structures, and the irony of that was that he had no systems and no structures.
So now you've got to name him. Yeah, come on, you've got to name him. No journalistic privilege there.
Hang on. You said you wouldn't name. So
I know, but I can hide behind like journalistic ethics.
All right. I won't name him, but I'll say that his name rhymes with Steve Martin. South Sydney Rabbitohs coach, 1998. Wow. What a ride that was. I think we won 5 games. 2 of those after Steve was punted. Anyway.
We're still live.
Yeah, still going. Hey, good stuff, mate. Stay well, and we'll catch up again next Thursday.
Next week. We'll get Rupert Murdoch on next week.
Yeah, I believe he's going to make room in his schedule, so we can look forward to that. Okay.
Bye.
See you, pal.